can I quickly now go and invite Professor Nwanze? Is he here on the workshop Resetting Education for us? Is he here?
Yes.
Okay.
I am here.
All right, of course. Yes. The floor is yours, Prof.
Thank you, sir. And may I start by apologizing profusely for not joining right from 12 o'clock. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can. We can, I think.
I've explained to Dele what kept me. There's an important state assignment. At any rate, it's a delight, and I'm extremely happy to be able to talk with you on this very important topic, education. That's resetting education. And I'll begin with the opening slide, in which I started with 4 statements. Aiworo was right, you know, free education is the only option. Only free education can guarantee access to all. To recreate or restructure the nation, education must be made free at all levels. And I end that first slide by saying that if you fix education, you have fixed life.
Wow.
The second slide opens with emphasizing the fact that the standard of education in Nigeria has fallen. I don't think anybody would dispute that, in spite of the lofty private universities you are setting up left, right, and center. The standard of education has collapsed in Nigeria. That's the truth. Because if you, no matter how elitist, you set up a small fraction of the population to benefit from top quality education for which they are paying millions of naira, you are catering only to a tiny percentage. So you have not addressed the cause of the majority, of the generality. So when we talk about the standard of education collapsing in Nigeria, we're talking about what the generality gets. This fall in the standard of education is a direct consequence of the malpractices in the community and educational institutions themselves. And I will add by saying that it is our common guilt. We are all responsible for it. I have taken this statement of our common guilt from one of my famous books by late Chukwuemeka Ike, titled Our Children Are Coming. Back to education. I think I espoused this in my last short talk to the Fatherland Group, at which I showed that education is nothing more than enlightenment. And I quoted various philosophers like Plato, Winston Churchill, Jawaharlal Nehru, Mark Twain, Albert Einstein, and Nelson Mandela, all converging on one truth about education. It is pure and simple enlightenment. So I have concluded by saying, if you can fix education, you have fixed life. Education begins from, it used to be said that it began from cradle to grave. But I wish to add now that newer information is showing that education actually begins before cradle, begins from conception and ends in the grave. Because it can be shown that the fetus across the amniotic fluid in the mother's womb has already started to perceive vibrations of ups and downs in the mother's mood. So the fetus literally can be said to be undergoing education even before birth. And this is a continuous process until death. Education can be segmented into two major sections. One is the redeemable portion, that's the crèche and nursery, during which any bad planning or damages inflicted on education can ostensibly, with time, be remedied. And then the second part, primary, secondary education, primary, secondary, and tertiary education, I beg your pardon, which is referred to as the irredeemable damage portion. This is the portion where if you get it wrong, you get life wrong in the nation. If you get it wrong, you get rioters in your streets. If you get it wrong, you get people who are basically ineducable and therefore cannot even fit into society. Just coincidentally, just when I was rushing down for this talk, a friend of mine sent me a WhatsApp in which I have forwarded to the chairman of Fatherland Group. And what was in that WhatsApp was a quote from Obafemi Awolowo in his days. And I quote, "The children of the poor you failed to train will never allow your own children to know peace. The children of the poor that you fail to provide for in training will never allow your children to have peace." Is it not unfolding today? The NSAS demonstration, the crisis in the country, the Almajiri problem, and the continuous violence it is generating, are they not symptoms of the children of the poor that we fail to provide for coming back to haunt us? So, having established this, we now moved on to assemble experts to address the issues and advise us. So that's why I said it's a hands-on approach, because we took time to compile the factors that will guide our administration, in which we assemble experts in pedagogy, experts in behavioral sciences, experts in psychology, experts among social scientists, experts of criminologists, experts on deviancy, and experts on attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. In a nutshell, psychosocial experts compiling for us all the factors that are inimical to promoting education. So factors that are inimical to education and factors that will promote education. The effect of best practices on PPP funding of the Ivory Tower. We were able to show that PPP funding of the Ivory Tower is as a result of a way of life enshrined in good behavior. So that the figure on that page, figure 9, best practices enhancing funding and produce global standards. If you don't have best practices entrenched, you will not get funding, because nobody will want to come and fund a riotous environment, a riotous campus. Which are the factors which produce these so-called desirable international standards? The factors in red there, buildings, facilities, and manpower, do not on their own produce international standards. Rather, as my good friend said in his introduction to this chapter of the talk, it is the culture and ethos and ethics and general good practices of the society that eventually lead to best practices which drive society to enhance funding.
Ross, you got 1 minute, just less than a minute now.
And when you have attained international standards, which is in fact a euphemism for globalization, because if you have international standards, you must have globalization. International standards cannot exist in isolation. It is a global affair. That is what makes it jive, as they say. Let us take a quick peek at what the SAP did to Nigeria in 1985 SAP, if you may recall. That was the Babangida era SAP. I was at a hearing in Senate when our matriarch of the diaspora, Abike Dabiri, produced data to show that 77% of Black doctors in the US are Nigerians. That was 2012. She further produced data to show that 7% of foreign doctors in the US are Nigerians. They are not mutually exclusive, these two facts. 10,000 Nigerian MDs exist in both the US and Canada. Nearly 4,000 doctors, Nigerian doctors, practice in the UK National Health Scheme. Our study embraced the years 1960 to 2017, divided or divisible into 11 quinquennia. A quinquennium is a 5-year period. So if you take 5-year bits between 1960 and 2017, you will get 11 quinquennia. The quinquennium 1985 to 1990 was a SAP year when the SAP was introduced. And it marked in 1985 the abrupt devaluation of the Naira from then 0 to 8.9 to the dollar to 17.3 to the dollar.
So thank you for talking life into that paper you've done. Thank you. And I take a message there is that if you fix education, you've fixed life. And I think it's a very important one. Thank you. Yeah. So can I use this opportunity now to ask, I think it's the discussants time. And I think the first discussant we have here is Ms. Olamide Akinwuntan. Right. If you're there, please, can you make yourself available to us?
Hello, everyone. Thank you, Tim. I'm actually having problems with my camera, okay, so I apologize that you can't see my face. So the listening to Mr. Modu, Professor Minyuku, and Mr. Nwanze has been massively enlightening. Thank you so much for speaking to us. On the topic of resetting education, it's something, yes, that I feel very passionate about. I really identified with Dr. Minyuku's point about a shared vision for a country and how that impacts, the trajectory that the country follows. As a young girl in Nigeria, we had civic education and we wrote many essays on how we were leaders of tomorrow. And we really had this dream that we're going to change the country. Unfortunately, on growing up, we then faced a system that almost looks like it's seeking to defeat us at every turn. So one of the big barriers to the education issue is overcoming the structural bottlenecks that prevent citizens from doing well. Currently, many Nigerians have an escape plan. I recently qualified as a doctor in the UK, and more than half of the people I went to secondary school with are now working or studying abroad, with many more of them planning to emigrate as soon as possible. So there is definitely a huge brain drain in Nigeria, education-wise. And to the point of many Nigerian doctors practicing in the UK, it is true that there are so many Nigerians doing amazing things all over the world. I think the Princeton Law School graduation is coming up and their valedictorian is the Nigerian girl. At my university, there are many Nigerians, Oxford, Cambridge, Harvard, MIT. And it's a testament to Nigerians that we succeed in all of these countries. But it's also an indictment to Nigeria that so many of our best people are seeking to be educated abroad. I strongly believe that the current leadership system intentionally keeps the populace from attaining the levels of education and insights that we are talking about on this platform. Because if the populace had that level of education and insights, it would be harder for the government to continue to apply the pressures that it does on us. So, as with every issue in Nigeria, or in Africa, really, an issue is how the population can come together to unseat these people who are so entrenched in their positions of power and so committed to exploiting the resources of the continent for their personal gain, rather than embarking on this community-led model of country building. So, yep, I think that's very important. And as a platform, it's been an honor to be in Fatherland. I admire our commitment to constantly relearn, not just in the academic sense, but in the philosophical sense, really trying to understand the factors that keep us where we are, and challenging our beliefs, constantly remolding the ways in which we conceptualize our ideas of who we are, where we can go, what needs to be done. And I really will try to be a judicious activist and enjoin you all to try the same. Thank you, Tim.
Thank you so much. As always, the clarity you give us, it's second to none. Thank you. I appreciate it. Okay, can I call on Mrs. Bola, Kosoko? Are you there?
Yeah, I am. Thanks, sir. Can I share my screen, please?
Yeah.
Bonnie.
You should be able to share it now. Just
okay. Is that working?
Yeah, we can see you. Yeah.
Right. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you to all the members of Fatherland. And it's been quite insightful listening to everyone else that's spoken. Dr. Miyuku, Professor Nwanze, and Olamide. I think for me, just looking back, when I thought about resetting education, one of the things that just came back to me is that going back to the grassroots. And I'm going to start on the premise of United Nations Convention of the Rights of the Child, which basically says that every child has a right to survival, protection, and education. So if we start from that, and it's about looking back to the foundation. Professor Nwanze mentioned earlier about the importance of that education starts from inception. So the foundation years are really key. And I think we need to start looking at that in the context of Nigeria. I mean, there's been overwhelming evidence that shows that children who enter kindergarten behind are likely to remain behind throughout their educational careers. So for us, we really need to start thinking about the foundation years, the educators, the standards and affordability. And for a child, every experience and encounter presents a learning opportunity. Because by providing education in early childhood, children learn basic foundation of their whole life and also develop the social, mental, and academic activities, which in effect is needed in order for them to build a solid and broad foundation for lifelong learning. So if the background is not right, if you don't get it right from the beginning, then the primary, secondary, and tertiary education is going to be a failure. And one of the other things I normally think about in the context of Nigeria is about the educators. Are Nigerian educators up to date? Are they knowledgeable enough to be able to educate our children? Are we really, do you have a standard for them to be able to move on? there's an issue about us promoting continuous development of our educators as well, in order for us to streamline it. And I'm not sure, I know a lot, I remember the last time I was in Nigeria, I saw a lot of nurseries all over the place. And it just occurred to me that, does it mean that in a country, anybody can just wake up to open a nursery? And for a second, I thought, is there any curriculum? Is there any standard? I'm not sure if there is, to be honest with you. It'll be interesting, somebody can clear that. But we need to have set design and standards within the country to set the quality. So we have goals and regulations and expectations so that our settings are inspected and people are accountable for educating our children. Doing that as well actually sets the competition between providers to be able to safeguard our children. The other thing that occurred to me, we have a lot of special needs children in Nigeria. What are we doing about them? Do we have any law that caters for them? What are we planning to deliver? So those are little things that we've kind of missed out. And that's why I keep saying, I think we need to step back and to rebuild, and we need to start from the grassroots. The other part of that is affordability. Dr. Nwanze talked about free education. I don't think it's impossible for us to start proposing free education from the early years. We can consider universal state provision. Even if we don't do it, we can cap and subsidize nurseries and cap their costs as well, and encourage both private and public education. And another part of that is thinking about the parents' flexibility that suits parents. We need to start engaging with parents from the onset. Moving on to I know I've only got 5 minutes. There's so many models around, and I think for me, the Scandinavian model is one that's holistic. Which uses education, it interacts with nutrition, health, social, and child protection. Going back to what Dr. Nwanze said about a child, education is from conception. I think with this model, they've actually got it right. Looking at, so what happens is that you've got the midwifery, where parents are engaged with from that level to support antenatal and pregnancy. And then that moves on to the child and health nursing, where they have home visits, early identification of any problems that these parents or children might have. And then that transits into the early years education. And beyond that, whilst children are at nurseries, if there are any preventative or any issues popping up, then you have early intervention, which obviously you can pick up early. So for me, thinking about this whole conference was more about thinking about how do we restructure our education. It's no good talking about the university level or secondary level if you haven't got the background right. And I think we need to really invest in the foundation years to be able to move it forward in Nigeria. Just to conclude on that, so moving forward, how do we recover from this? I think it's time for us to consider a more integrated policy framework that ensures that all our systems are all joined up. We need to start looking at universal child health and ensure that all our facilities are well-staffed and equipped. It might seem like a huge task, but I'm sure that in Nigeria, if we really put our mind to it, we can afford to do this. We need to look at developing a more fully integrated family support program. Family is key to education. We need to invest in our families as well. We need to look at training and upskilling and early year staff to respond to poverty around us and the attainment gap, to be able to manage that as well. We need to have an effective inspection framework in place, something that guides and regulates our childcare provision within Nigeria. We need to learn to promote early intervention as well. And of course, to aim at quality, affordable, and accessible childcare for all families within Nigeria. And of course, moving forward, we need to ensure ongoing monitoring to ensure childcare policy is tailored to the needs of the population.
Thank you.
So in short, just to summarize that, basically, if we invest in our young, then we are hoping to build a better future, because that early years investment is really key in order for us to be able to, I mean, our children are our future, really. So if we don't invest in them early enough, then we can't expect that when they grow up and they get into government, they're going to be what we want them to be. So that's my take on it, really, just to focus on early years.
Thank you very much, Bola. I really appreciate it. Thank you, because this is part of those drilling in. What the section you picked up was very important. So that's one thing about this workshop. It allows very, all the micro elements of the whole aspects of education. Your contribution, really appreciate it. Thank you very much on that.
Thank you.
So can I call on Ola Alade if she's here to help and make her presentation?
He's not here, Tim, so okay. You can move on to the next person.
Oh, right, I see. Adeleke. Adefala? If it's not there, we can call on, is Adeleke here? All right, okay. What about Justice Kuranta?
So I think the next person that you might want to call is Linda Hastrup.
Okay, Linda, right, okay. Linda Hastrup. Is Linda there?
Okay. Hello?
Yeah.
Yeah,
right.
I'm unmuted.
Right. Okay.
First, I'd like to thank Prof for the talk on resetting education. I think it's such an important topic. And I think that whilst it's a mirror image of every area in the Nigerian society regarding that needs resetting, it's pretty much at the forefront of everything. I know that today we were focusing on how to get things better within the education setting, but I think we also need to look back and see how we got it so wrong. And I decided to take a journey down memory lane and have a think about how we were when we first got education introduced into Nigeria by the West. And whilst it was under colonial rule, it wasn't really promoted per se. And a lot of the schools that started were missionary-based schools. So the government, the colonial masters, it wasn't their priority. It was more the missionaries that pushed forward now. I think we were on a good journey towards sound education throughout the 70s. And I'm sure that everybody can recollect that school was good, education was good, teachers were good. And I noticed that the decline can be traced back to the 80s and 90s, where we started to develop a shortage in qualified teachers. Now, a shortage in qualified teachers, when I say qualified teachers, not on paper, but the good quality teaching that we were accustomed to during the 70s and early 80s, that seemed to be had dwindled as we went along. And I think that we can trace everything back to us and our oil boom, and the focus being taken off everything that mattered and focused on this one sole thing that seemed to have been dropping a lot of money into people's pockets. And so the things that should have mattered and the things that we as a nation should have built on, we left by the rot started from there. There were issues with irregular pay. Suddenly it was no longer cool to be a teacher or a lot of other honorable professions that people were engaged in at the time. Everything seemed to fall by the wayside. Now, another thing that happened at that point in time was this irregular pay for teachers, leading to a lot of union strikes and poor quality education as a result of that. Then I also noticed that we had inadequate funding for existing schools, leading to poor maintenance. Hence, we see that not only the content is wrong, but the structure around the enabling environment that people need to learn effectively is in shambles. Then we have a think about the number of new schools that didn't match the population growth. So somewhere along the line, our government got it wrong, because as a nation is growing, you've got to plan ahead and think that by X number of years, we will have X number of children, and we'll need X number of facilities in which we would have to educate them. And hence, some classes where you see people having 100 children in a classroom, unbelievable situations at hand right now. And another thing was demand in fees from university lecturers who were underpaid, riots, semesters missing. So you can see that the decay was all the way from the bottom to the top, and we're where we are today now as a result of it. And to be honest with you, we are now products in the Nigerian education system. Most of them are unemployable, causing, I mean, the reality is that great unemployment, because we've got a nation of youngsters who can barely read or write and yet have gone through our education system. Now, I found out that we are supposed to be the ones that have the highest number of children out of school. 10 million children apparently out of school. That's a large number. I know we have a great nation, a big population, but 10 million children out of school speaks volumes for how much of a failure we've become in the education sector. And I was researching what others were doing. Third world countries, not so much modern countries, because they've got it right and they're on a good trajectory. But for countries that have struggled like ourselves, they found public-private partnerships have worked pretty well. We're adopting some kind of school voucher system, and where you have parents receive a subsidized amount to pay for children, either in state or private schools. And this has worked in countries like Ivory Coast, Bangladesh, and some parts of South America. There are also charter schools. Even in the UK, there are charter schools. Charter schools are another example of a way in which you can help raise the standards. And this is where the government retains ownership of the schools, while the daily operations are contracted out to private sector management. And often at times in countries like the UK, that happens when a school is failing and they get a private sector to do what they do best, but with the government still fully involved in owning the school. And disadvantaged areas in American cities, this has been very popular and has pushed the standards up. So I think that as a nation, we've got to, I know that we've got all these amazing policies in place that nobody ever looks at or reads or understands. And that's a very good at putting together committees to reform education and write all these incredible parts, because government is poor all around. So I think that
thank you.
It's very important that we get where we can get private involvement and move forward.
Thank you, Linda. Thank you. Thank you. It's useful to remind us about the past as well, so that we know where we got it wrong. So it's useful contribution. So can I call, is it Salewa? AkinDeko.
That's me, Salewa. Yes.
Thank you. I wasn't sure if I got Salewa or Salewa, I should say.
It's okay. Okay, so let me just jump in. And I thoroughly enjoyed the lecture from Dr. Minyuku and Professor Nwanze. And yes, it's a broad topic. There are many areas which we can touch on, which is all part of the, touching on the problems, which eventually will create the solution. I'm kind of like a now person, so I like to deal with the issues as I see them right now. And the issues that I see that we're all facing here is this, almost like, does it pay to be a graduate anymore? And that worries me, because it's not just the financial gain that comes with being a graduate. Education itself builds character, and I don't want that to fall. So while I was researching the topic, of course, we have key problems like the other speakers have clearly identified, which include underfunding, promised reforms, or rather under promised reforms. We've heard from the Jonathan government, the government before that, the Buhari government, it's just never implemented. We also have, of course, academic corruption and fraud. There was that video they shared on the Fatherland Group, which covered jam fees, which was meant to be 3,500, then someone took 8,000. It's all of the same thing, Yes, many nursery schools coming up. There was the one which, caused the death of about 18 children, where they just opened the building up despite knowing they were not allowed to have, to take people in there. And then they put these little kids in there and they lose their lives because, apparently these people don't care enough. So like I said, I like to look at the now. We can go over all the other things, but mine is the now, and the now is a tertiary education. So I started thinking, okay, so what works in Nigeria? Yes, the UNICEF in 2017 or 2021 said there are 13 million people out of school. I doubt it. I think there are a lot more people out of school. I'm sure the stratification was probably based in the South. If we look at the North combined, I think there are a lot more children out of school. I've been in situations where I will speak to street kids, try and get them involved in some of the charities that we engage in. And when we have to speak to their parents, the parents run away. They'll rather have them on the streets than in school. So to them, the return on investment for education is much less than having their child sell plantain, you know? You have a few people, influencers, that are very big in terms of Yahoo and all these things, and their parents support them. So my issue now is, where is it working and how can we build on that? So there was a report by Stoughton. Stoughton is run by Taiwo and Kehinde. I can't remember their last names now. They went to one of the private schools in Nigeria. They're doing extremely well. They're Y Combinator graduates, and they built up this platform, you know, which is focusing on the education system in Nigeria. Again, brilliant Nigerians, which will bring me to the point of, there's a guy called Jeremy Johnson. He's one of the co-founders of Andela. Andela trains engineers and then gives them jobs outside the country. So one of his founding beliefs was that brilliance is evenly distributed around the world, but opportunity isn't. And that's true. If I got on social media and I see this person in KPMG doing well, she's got her car, those kind of things will encourage more people to understand that, no, there's something to be gained here. But we only have a few employers in Nigeria. Out of every 5 million graduates that leave universities, only about 450,000 probably find employment. And we're talking about salaries in the range of, like, at best, maybe 100,000 a month to start off with. And then they operate this kind of like medieval system where, you know, like the journeyman. So you first of all become a guild, then after you're a guild, then you go into being a journeyman, then before you become a master. And so you're still going into a form of education, even after receiving your tertiary education, you know? And so I started thinking, apparently Covenant University probably has the most employable graduates. So does the University of Ilorin. That also gives people probably the highest number in terms of return on investment from how much their parents or they have put into the education. And within a year, they're able to pay that money, they're able to earn that money back, you know, which is great. We need to see, you know, how does that work? What are they teaching them? We need to link tertiary education to the current employers, the strong employers. What are they looking for? So that these education and programs, like there was a girl called Komolafe, she's a graduate of the Andela program. She works in the States now. And she said something at the age of 25. And she said, Africa's education system emphasizes on theory and a lack of exposure to up-to-date program tools and techniques. So you come out of school and you're still not employable. You know, you get $3 an hour as an engineer, but if you go to the US, you're looking at about $30 an hour within the first year, and then maybe about $65,000 and $85,000. So yes, there will be a brain drain. But how about the companies that are here in Nigeria, the KPMGs, the Coca-Colas, the Andelas, the Guinness, they all, and the great thing with those ones is that they all have a training program. So anyone that brings a CV from any employer and they have KPMG on that CV, they're hiring you immediately. So we need to kind of match what those employers want to what the schools are actually teaching these people. So it's not a waste of time. So a few other statistics would probably include, yes, and Nigeria is really performing almost in the, you know, bottom few in the world in terms of education. So just to conclude, tertiary reform linked to economic growth. There is a need for knowledge education products to be prepared for the fast-paced world of today. This cannot be done without the contribution of job owners. And that's where I conclude. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Salewa. It's really great. I think I like the idea of the return on investment
The accountant in me, yes.
How you put the tertiary institution on notice, so that it's really interesting. I've learned something new. Thank you very much for that. So I think the next speaker will be Juliana Olayinka. Juliana, yep, I'm sure you're there.
You can hear me?
Yeah, right.
You can say I almost got a headache through not in agreement with everything Salewa said. Really up, and I'm so happy because it's almost great that you were just before me, even though I'm sure you may not agree with everything I've got to say. I'm also like you, I like to live in the now, but I'm going to go back to, reference some of my points. First of all, as well, I want to say thank you, Dele, for, providing this platform to have this robust set of discussions, which have just been so insightful. I've been feasting upon all of the knowledge. One thing I want to say, I want to start with a quote. Often, an accent perceived as rough conceals insight and intelligence. Similarly, it's as often the case that a proper accent conceals ignorance, prejudice, and ignorance. Or underestimating the intelligence of our so-called masses, just because they haven't received a Western education. I know I haven't got long, but I want to just read a very tiny extract from a profound book, which many of you may or may not have read, The Miseducation of the Negro. It was originally published in 1933 by Dr. Carter G. Wilson. The thesis of the book is basically saying that Blacks of that time were being culturally indoctrinated rather than taught. And personally, lots of the stuff he wrote about 90 years ago, I think resonates with what's happening in Nigeria today and also amongst the diaspora. This is from chapter 5, The Failure to Learn to Make a Living. Okay, what Negroes are now being taught does not bring their minds into harmony with life as they must face it. When a Negro student works his way through college by polishing shoes, he does not think of making a special study of the science underlying the production and distribution of leather and its products that he may someday figure in this sphere. The Negro boy sent to college by a mechanic seldom dreams of learning mechanical engineering to build upon the foundation his father has laid, that in years to come he may figure as a contractor or a consulting engineer. The Negro girl who goes to college hardly wants to return to her mother if she is a washerwoman, but this girl should come back with sufficient knowledge of physics and chemistry and business administration to use her mother's work as a nucleus for a modern steam laundry. A white professor of a university recently resigned his position to become rich by running a laundry for Negroes in a southern city. A Negro college instructor would have considered such a suggestion an insult. The so-called education of Negro college graduates leads them to throw away opportunities which they have and to go in quest of those which they do not find. So I want us really to question Western education, and I want us to criticize it. It's not that it's just not working in Nigeria. It's not working in many parts of the world. You know, sitting in front of a classroom, in front of a blackboard doesn't work for everybody. There are children in the West who struggle with that model. And many of them, unfortunately, are seen as other or are put aside. The great thing about Western or developed democracies is that they have, vocational studies, highly skilled vocational programs that are able to, kind of get the best out of those children. Why can't we do the same in Nigeria? I think that's so important that we start looking at, these viable skills. We shouldn't, I think, and I think this is something that we do, especially those of us that see ourselves as educated, look down upon, the masses because we think, oh no, they really do need decent education. But what is that decent education going to afford them? Yes, I believe that, of course, we do need the basics, reading and writing. But beyond that, what is the education that we have got from Britain or America or wherever else going to transfer to them. We should be uplifting them and helping them. So for example, you know, traders, market women, entertainers, cooks, tailors, going back to what Woodson was saying, you know, a lot of these skills, you know, they can be extrapolated and they can become business owners. They can be very, very entrepreneurial, rather than the Oyinbo and the Chinese constantly coming in and, you know, being the father or the parent company of those skills. Why do we not push them to expand those skills rather than say they must go through this Western education, which brings them to what? I was going to say one other thing as well. Sorry, I've just lost my train of thought. But I think we also need to, if we think about education being an important a place where we learn physical, social, and mental and health skills, I also don't think we should be as judgmental of a lot of these prosperity churches, which are giving a lot of our people back home, you know, hope. Hope is really important. Feeling as if, you know, you can keep going on, keep striving, making the most of your life, being your best self. A lot of that is the basis of a really good education. So rather than us poking our nose down and saying this is the way you should educate yourself, we should look at the way the masses have been able to adapt, you know, in what they've inherited by the colonial masters, and, you know, and lift them up, you know, each one teach one. So yeah, that's what I've got to say in closing.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you very much, Juliana. I think the idea of decolonizing education, it's a key message, and it's happening, and I agree with you. I think we must come out of that colonization, the colonial mentality on our education system. So it's a very useful contribution. Is Dayo Fadina here?
No, he's not.
Okay, right. Who else? Next is Edson Aiworo.
Aiworo.
Take
note, Tim. Take note.
I will take note. Make sure I didn't miss that.
I'm just joking.
Yeah.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you. Tim, you're a good moderator. You're doing a good job as a co-chair. Kindly, thank you very much. I'd like to use this opportunity to thank Dele and the rest of the team. You guys are doing a fantastic job. Well, as you know me, I'm not someone who, you know, I do my research in the past, but I'm just going to ramble on because I've been a Nigerian since what? Can I say 50 years ago? And yeah. Well, first of all, I'd like to start by thanking Tim, as I said, thanking Dr. Biki Minyuku, yeah, and also thanking the great Professor Nwanze for the brilliant insights into his thesis and to the prevailing problems in education resetting in Nigeria. According to the 2019 Executive Summary on Poverty and Inequality by the National Bureau of Statistics, 40% of the population of Nigeria, which is the largest producer of oil in Nigeria, inverted commas, I don't know how true that is now, is classified as poor. That is to say, it's morally obscene and spiritually profane. This is, on average, 4 out of 10 Nigerians per capita expenditure live below $400. A UNICEF report also mentioned that roughly 10 million Nigerian children aged between 5 to 14 years old are not in school. Only 61% between 6 and 11-year-olds regularly attend primary school. That stats is deplorable. We'll talk about some northeastern states and northwest states of the country. Half of the girls are not enrolled, roughly half of the girls are not enrolled in schools and are marginalized. Stats, here we go. Well, a struggle was going on during the COVID-19 pandemic, as we all know, right, to ensure that the young children stay at home and do. Now, the Lagos State government brought out a plan on TV whereby they had to, you know, use computers. The question then becomes, who will provide the, can I say, the weak and the vulnerable, the poor and the poor students, or can I say families, these equipment? Another question. Children in rural and undeserved communities in Nigeria are being left behind as they are not equipped to adapt or transition to the new methods of learning. That's for the children. Now, we do have poor staffing and inadequate, professionals also. That's a big point. Poor teaching, as well as poor, top teachers, professors, lecturers, because of the continuity of research. That's another area we need to look at, i.e. to bequeath these students or these, primary school pupils, what to do. Now, if you don't have that research base or the finance for research to teach, or should I say, a lecturer, make a professor or a teacher understand what they're doing, how are they now going to impart and bequeath the knowledge onto the children? Incessant strikes. I came in 91. Why? I was in University of Jos. I was there for a year. And what happened? They went on strike. My dad said, okay, come to England. I was opportunity to come to school here. And can you believe that a lot of the people that I went to university with in Nigeria actually graduated? I graduated 2 years before them, and they were on a 5-year degree course. That's another question. Nihilism. Nihilism is a big factor in Nigeria. Why? The kids are nihilistic, meaninglessness, lovelessness, and hopelessness. They have nothing to live for. So what are we talking about? These are questions we need to ask ourselves, irrespective of the education, irrespective of what we're going through during the political, atrocities that go on in Nigeria. Currently, the COVID-19 pandemic is revolutionizing the country and Nigeria and Africa. And the fact that people are now studying from their mobile phones. If you go to Nigeria, go to primary schools, they all have mobile phones, cheap mobile phones, not iPhones. And they are studying them, which is actually helping the rural population. So we have to look into all these things. I'll quickly cut it short, because I believe, from what Dr. Biki Menu says, I believe I'm a revolutionary Christian. Why? Because I understand we've got our presuppositions, our unarticulated assumptions, and that I'm a redeemer with gangster proclivity, always in the need for God. So we are now talking about radical incongruity and confronting it. That's why we're all here today. Radical incongruity, and we're not being seduced to truncated notions of logical consistency and theoretical coherence. And that is what it is. Because if you're seduced to logical consistency and theoretical coherence, you're now copying the politicians. And by doing that, we'll now settle for the little they are doing. That's why we need to change our mindset. We need to really change the mindset in order to move on and postulate the new researches and learn and relearn, as Tim Modu said. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you. That was, I like the COVID disruption. It's a new one on me. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, the next person, I think, is Richard George.
Yes. Thank you, Tim. Well done, everyone. Can I get the opportunity to share my screen, please, Bonnie, if you don't mind? Right. So this is what we're talking about. To be quite honest, it's a little bit difficult or challenging for me to say I have anything else to add. I can't follow in the footsteps of the brilliant speakers who've come before me. And everything everyone has said is absolutely spot on, and I agree with. But let me borrow a leaf from what I learned from Dele in one of our sessions. He said there is a concept in law called the fraud unravels all. And therefore, education is the foundation of everything we have to put in place for us to be able to move forward. We can't talk about democracy or building consensus in terms of having a roadmap with which our peoples want to be governed unless the foundation is right, and that is the pillar upon which everything else will be founded. Hence, I say I admire what everyone is saying. Just to show you a few clips here, just this one for 2 minutes, very briefly, bringing in some other stakeholders who are actually on ground experiencing what we're talking about. Not this one, sorry.
Richard, I think also, if there's one message that's coming clear, there's that reference you made on what Dele said about fraud and something that I think I want to know more about that, because I want to see the connection between that and education, how you actually transposed it into the educational issue. So we'll look forward to that.
Yeah. Can you see my screen right now, though?
We can just see you.
Okay, this is not working. It's a shame because...
don't worry, just go on, just go on, just go on.
Richard, you've already done the work. You've already done the screen. You've already done your work. So it will be in the forum. So I know
like me.
Right. Well, I'm sorry you can't see this. In terms of resetting education in Nigeria, part of my research, which I conducted, was based around a new taxonomy for corruption in Nigeria by the Kennedy Endowment for International Peace, which took place in 2018. And here is what they said in that report. Even though Nigerians near universally recognize education as key to socio-economic advancement, the country's education sector has been hurt by decades of corruption and mismanagement, whether it be officials embezzling money meant to build, furnish, and equip schools, or extorting money for students in return for admission or exam grades. Educational corruption remains a nationwide problem. Nigerian universities have been especially hard hit by the effects of corruption, which has hollowed out once proud institutions like the University of Ibadan and the University of Nigeria at Nsukka. Several government entities involved in education, the Joint Admissions and Matriculation Board, the Tertiary Education Trust Fund, and the Universal Basic Education Commission, to name a few, have experienced corruption scandals in recent years. One such incident recently went viral after a JAMB official accused of embezzling 36 million naira, which is the equivalent at the time of $100,000, claimed that a snake had slithered into her office and had eaten the money. Although comical, this incident hints at the massive scope of corruption and the education sector. It is a major impediment to Nigeria's socio-economic development. So that's pretty much the underbelly of that. It's a shame you can't see the slide because there's a lot of statistics I put in there. However, is the Nigerian education system, now we have come, someone said COVID-19 has disrupted our educational world or life in general. So the question to ask is the Nigerian education system at this point in time designed to adapt to rapidly changing world? A lot of speakers have already provided responses to that question. So what we now need is resetting and addressing through a collaborative framework with critical stakeholders, what Professor Nwanze said or referred to as psychosocial experts, such as he put in place in the University of Benin. So first, we need to look at designing and developing as well as deploying and adopting technology, what is now known as massive online or massive open online program. Because according to the Digital 2020 Global Report published in January 2020, about 60% of Nigerians are not connected to the internet. And therefore, that links to what Edson, Aiworo was talking about earlier on. We need to find a way to reach out to the rural communities. Provision of adequate infrastructure and architecture that is easy to access, affordable, and bespoke to eliminate inequality, which we said is north-south factors in terms of gender and all that. Engagement and mobilization of critical stakeholders, including the diasporas, to prepare alternative learning programs that fits in with the narrative of what I think it was Olayinka that mentioned that, as well as looking at decolonizing and deconstructing the current learning programs to reflect our sociocultural history, historical values, and the realities of the Nigerian environment to ensure relevance for advancement and creative development.
Richard, I'm so sorry that you had that blip, but I could see the energy there. Believe you me, I'm sure many of us are interested because you're talking about original research there. So I think it's something will be really of a gift if we can sort of host that in Fatherland. It's a wonderful, I like when things are that original. So well done for the work you've done. Thank you for sharing it with us. can I call on Lara Oyedele? If Yala is there, okay, right. Of course, I should have known better. Okay, is Benji Classic FM?
No, he's not participating.
Okay, right. And what about Caroline?
Yes, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Good, nearly evening, still afternoon, everyone. I should be saying good night, actually, because as I said to others earlier on the call, I flew in from Nigeria this morning.
Wow.
So I'm gradually beginning to feel that tiredness creep in now. So I'm going to go through mine as quickly as I can. But first of all, just to say thank you very much to Fatherland Delhi. This session really is brilliant. The topics that have been covered all deserve a platform of their own. And I certainly look forward to making a lot of what's been discussed today a reality, so that we don't continue to exist in rhetoric. Unfortunately, I did receive the papers somewhat late. So what I'm going to just talk through are some of the notes that I made whilst I was on the plane, and some brief discussions that I had with some young people 2 days before I flew out, just around the topic of education, some of them in education, some of them educators, and some of them having come out of education. So, I mean, one of the things that to me seems quite apparent, and forgive me, I also want to thank yourself, Tim, and Professor Nwanze and Professor Minyuku for your earlier papers and presentations as well. And Tim, learning to unlearn, thank you for that, because that's something that I'm going to take away with me and actually, really think about how we do learn to unlearn, so that we can unlearn to learn, if you like. But thank you very much for that paper. So where I'm going to come at this from then, from various different areas, but what seems to be apparent to me, just through my observations and conversations with various people, is that the education system in Nigeria, there seems to have been what to me appears to be a systematic, or what might even be said to be a deliberate degradation and dismantling of the education system in Nigeria. Now, that's my view. Now, this is by people of power, or by power, in order as a means of control and personal gain. This trip that I took to Nigeria, one of the things that I noticed was the increase of private schools that are popping up all over the country. Now, one thing we know is that private schools are not built or funded by the poor. Private schools are built by those who have, the elite, who have the means. And those people who they're educating, by and large, are not the poor. So they're educating other elites. And so to me, the elite seem to be part of the big problem that we have here. And I think that's been mentioned in one of the earlier talks today. So the elite, to me, definitely are part of the glue that are holding this issue of the downfall of the educational system in Nigeria together. And so that really needs to be broken up. So we're talking about resetting education in Nigeria. What we actually need to be doing is thinking about political reset. Because again, that is where the power is held. That's where it all begins. Now, one of the other points that that was made in the paper was I think there's a point made around cultism. Now, cultism, again, from the discussions that I've had with many young people, as I say, this is only over the last couple of days, just around the whole issue of cultism. What I've understood also is that that itself is funded by the elite. And whilst it's the ones that are the young people who are either uneducated, unable to get employment, that are the ones that are out there within these cults, they are being funded by educated elites. So there again, the elite become part of our problem. So what needs to happen here is what I consider to be a fundamental redesign of the infrastructure that undermines access to education. And this includes not just the physical infrastructure, but we're talking also about, the political infrastructure, the buildings, the roads. A lot of reasons why a lot of young people can't even get education is because they can't even travel to school. And some of the reasons why some of the people who I spoke to send their children to private school, private boarding schools, that is 15 minutes away from where they live. Why are you sending your child to a boarding school when you live 15 minutes away from the school? Because it will take them 3 hours to get to school. And in that 3 hours, you're missing a lot of vital education. These are just things that I learned just in the last couple of days. So the other point I wanted to make as well, I've made the point about the private school system, and it really is flourishing. It's a problem for us. In terms of the politicians, they are the biggest problem, because all of that, you give me one politician out there right now whose child is being educated in Nigeria, in a Nigerian state school. Of course not. They're flying them all out. If you're going to take up public office, educate your children at home. That has to be one of the fundamental requirements of taking up public office. Because if you can educate your children at home, you will work hard to make sure that that system works for your children, works for the country that you have been appointed to serve. That is one of the, the biggest missing links that we really, really need to sort out. There was a point made earlier on also about collaboration. I really like the point. And the question was also asked by Dele, what do you mean about on collaboration? And I think a point was made that collaboration, hopefully we're going to have a slightly separate discussion on that at some point. I would like educational institutions to be considered as part of that collaborative working in whatever way that might be. So just going to, I've had some of the young people that I wasn't able to speak to. I've had so many text messages, WhatsApp messages from young people, young students, young graduates, young people in employment. And I would like to share them with the group. I don't have fully the time to go through all of it, but I'll go through some of them. The Nigerian education system is in deep crisis on multiple fronts, and we've already addressed some of those points on this discussion today. But one of the other key ones is the mass kidnappings that we are witnessing and experiencing. In a matter of months, my understanding is that some 600 children were kidnapped whilst at school. Yes, this was in the northern regions, I believe in Mandu and Kaduna State. Why then are you going to want to go to school? Why then are you going to want to send your child to school? Another young educator who I spoke, education in Nigeria is taught in English. A lot of local young people, they struggle with English. Why can't the syllabus be designed in local languages? Because
Thank you. Yeah. Caroline, thanks. I think we're just running a few minutes late, but I think please continue to, the materials you've provided, it will be useful because, we have libraries, so some of these things will be part of the library. Eventually, the Fatherland Group will be a formidable force in terms of Chatham House. We will be better than Chatham House.